Vulnerability. We all have heard this word very often in these days due to the COVID pandemic, and there are a lot of vulnerabilities. Now, what actually is a vulnerability? Well, weakness of an asset or a control that can be exploited by one or more threats is vulnerability. Now, this definition is according to the ISO 27000, that is the Information Security Management System Standard, and they define vulnerability as a weakness of a system. It can also be a flaw in the system or a defect through which bad guys can hack a system. For example, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, or let's say file upload vulnerability. All these are kinds of vulnerability. Command injection is a very simple vulnerability to be exploited. Now, vulnerabilities that don't have corresponding threats may not require controls but should be recognized and monitored for the changes. Controls that get implemented incorrectly or malfunction could become vulnerabilities. Now, the vulnerability assessment can be complicated by a common interception that the weakness or shortcomings are always associated with negative characteristics. Now, many vulnerabilities are indeed negative characteristics, as in information system where patches are not updated. Now, many organizations have, started having a concern about cybersecurity, and that is why most of the organizations have started paying attention to their systems. But earlier, for the last decade, most of the systems were unpatched, and it was a very good vulnerability for hackers to actually get into the system. So, but in order for you to understand the definition, just make sure that vulnerability is a weakness of an asset or a flaw into the system. It's like an open gate for a hacker to enter into the building. For example, a building is your system, and if there is an open gate left with no security guard, it is a vulnerability for your software, right? So, yes, a defect through which bad guys can hack is definitely a vulnerability. Now let us see the different types of vulnerabilities. So the first type of vulnerability can be hardware vulnerabilities, like insufficient maintenance or faulty installation of a storage media, or lack of periodic replacement schemes is a type of a hardware vulnerability. Software vulnerability, that is insufficient software testing, complicated user interface, unpatched softwares, malicious softwares with no license defined, no policies defined, is a vulnerability in the software. Network vulnerability. Unprotected communication lines is a great example of network vulnerability, or unpatched routers. Then single point of failure, insufficient security training is a type of personal vulnerability. Now, you might have seen that many organizations have, started having a training sessions of information security, because due to this COVID pandemic, all the businesses have started running remotely, and that is why there is a need of information security. That is why people and employees must be trained for network security or cyber security in order to prevent or protect the organizations. Now, site vulnerability can be unstable power grid, or location of an area which is susceptible to an earthquake or floods. That is a kind of physical vulnerability. An organizational vulnerability can be lack of proper allocation of information security responsibilities, or lack of information security responsibilities in job descriptions. Generally, these days, when I look for my students, when I am looking to their career development, I have started seeing many job descriptions have started including the term security or information security standards, must have relevant experience or must have knowledge when it comes to information security. Now, that is why this trend has been increasing. So I think this course is going to be the wonderful course for you. So make sure you listen properly and complete this course till the end, and don't forget to share your feedback. So by now we have learned different types of vulnerabilities. We have learned the CIA triad. We know what is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And most importantly, we have defined the term information security. Now let's move forward with a threat. What is a threat?